Hello BookTube, Sean here, welcome back to my channel. Hope you are all doing well. And just want to, before I get to the main point of this video and before I forget, I just want to do a few quick thank yous actually for three lovely ladies who've been generous enough to do shout outs for my channel in the past couple of weeks. The first is Dee over on the channel Books and Quirks. The second is Amy on the channel Zoe Beck. I always want to say Zoe at the channel Amy Beck, but yes, Amy at the channel Zoe Beck. And finally, Booky Lorra, who did a shout out on a recent small booktuber tag video. So thank you to all three of those. I will link all three channels down below and would recommend that you go and check out their content, and if you like it, subscribe. So that's the thank yous out of the way. Now on to what I wanted to talk about, which I think is going to be a very rambling, free-form discussion of audiobooks and the way we experience audiobooks differently to reading a book. And this came out of an experience that I had recently with a book called The Nix by Nathan Hill. But before we get to that, I just wanted to make sure that the boundaries of our discussion are clear here before I get sucked into any kind of wider debates. Because there is this kind of cyclical conversation that happens here on BookTube from time to time about whether audiobooks or consuming books as an audiobook is as valid a form of reading, I guess, as picking up a book and reading them. Whether you can legitimately say that you have read a book if you consumed it by audiobook. And to me, that's kind of like a moot point. I think we should just be thankful that people are interested in books, they're interested in stories, they are interested in supporting their favourite authors, and if there is a format that suits their lifestyle because they commute or whatever it might be, and that it happens to be an audiobook, then, you know, what's the problem, is my kind of view on it. Let's face it, in the pre-literate era, or at least in the era when literacy was not particularly widespread, it was the oral tradition of storytelling. Pretty much all stories were transmitted as the audiobook of the day. One of my favourite programmes when I grew up was a children's programme called Jack and Ori, which was basically you tuned in and watched somebody read you a story, some kind of Z-list children's TV celebrity reading you a story, and what's the problem with that? I don't see that as being any less valid than somebody consuming the story by picking it up and reading it themselves. So that's my position on that. But this experience that I had with The Nix did give me some pause for thought, not necessarily about validity of reading, as in, is an audiobook as valid as somebody picking up the same book and reading it, but more about, I guess, more the kind of experiential kind of quality of those two experiences, and the way that the format in which we consume a book can change how we look upon a book or a particular chapter or whatever. And it might be that it was because this chapter in particular that I'm going to refer to in a moment was one that captured a lot of humour. So let me get to the point, Charlie. That would be quite helpful, wouldn't it, Sean? So there was this chapter in The Nix where I decided to listen to it on audiobook, and there are a few books that make me laugh out loud, full stop. I mean, I may find a book funny, but there are a few books that make me laugh out loud. I may, chortle from time to time, but, no belly laughs. But this particular chapter in The Nix was, I can't remember anything else that I've read making me laugh as much as this chapter. And it was a chapter where the main protagonist, a guy called Sam, who's a university lecturer, has caught one of his students called Laura plagiarising an essay. And he set his class a topic of logical fallacies in Shakespeare. I think the play may be Hamlet or it may be Othello. I can't remember. And it's set in his office, and basically this student is trying to argue back against Sam, who's the main character, that she shouldn't be held responsible, that he should reconsider, that he should let her take the essay again. And as she works through this entire argument, she uses every logical fallacy in argument. So the chapter is kind of split up by the kind of Latin names for the various logical fallacies in argument, and she uses every one of them. Appeal to emotion, all these kind of arguments. But what made it particularly funny, and this is what kind of gave me pause for thought, was the fact that the narrator managed to encapsulate so much of that humour in the way that he was kind of expressing these two different characters. So although it was one narrator, he was very much playing both of them as different characters. He was doing different voices, and so it's very much like a radio play in some ways, that you had this kind of exchange, this dialogue going on, and it could have been two different actors or whatever playing the different parts. And so much of the humour was kind of encapsulated in the way that they were expressing themselves as in this audiobook, the kind of exasperation that came across in the voice of this kind of laid-back professor versus the kind of emotion and sense of entitlement that was portrayed in the voice of the student. And that got me thinking, once I'd kind of laughed my way through that entire chapter, a little while later I was thinking, I could have taken the choice to pick up that chapter and read it on my Kindle, and would I have found it as funny if I'd have just been reading it? And this may be maybe denigrating my own imagination, that if I'd have just been reading that, I wouldn't have been able to find the humour in it. But it's a lot of the humour, or what percentage of the humour was actually coming across because of this performative kind of element in the audiobook. So that was kind of my experience, and that really was what led me to the kind of questions about the different experience in somebody picking up a book and reading it, and somebody experiencing a story being told to them in the audiobook. As I say, I'm not getting into a debate here about whether one is more valid in terms of a way of consuming a book, but has anybody else had any of these experiences where the experience has either been enhanced by doing it on a certain kind of format, and you've thought, well, I wouldn't necessarily have got that if I'd have done it another way? And I can never go back now and experience that chapter for the first time. Even if I read it now on my Kindle, I would always have those voices and that kind of performance element lodged in my head. So I can't kind of erase that and go back and experience it the first run through again and see whether actually it would have still been as funny. So anyway, that was kind of, it's not really a discussion video, is it? I've not really asked any questions, but just share with me below your kind of own experiences of audiobooks, and whether you think actually, do some books therefore lend themselves to consumption as an audiobook and others not? And should we be concerned that actually it's the same text, but our kind of experience of it is being driven by format? Should that be a concern to us? I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, share your thoughts and experiences with me down below in the comments. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you later.